Welcome back, everybody. It is the Line Movers Podcast, college football, week one and season preview. It's so great to be back. It's finally here. Summer's winding down. Once again, the Line Movers Podcast. I'm David Dorman, but the stars of the show are back this year. Ian Robbins, Trey Edge. You guys ready?
So ready. Swamp King's on Netflix. My Gator stuff from back there. Ready to roll.
Yeah, nothing better, man. And, for me personally, getting ready to roll out Saturday night and watch the Heels play the Gamecocks. Game day's there. So it's just, week zero was week zero, but this feels like the beginning.
Yeah.
Are you going to the game, Trey?
I am. Yes, sir.
Wow. There he goes.
Win, lose, or draw, I'm going.
Yeah.
Let's get right to it. Our guys are going to break down the biggest games of the weekend, then we'll get to some full season thoughts. But let's start Saturday night with the game we just brought up, 7:30 Eastern, ABC. Fowler and Curbstead will be there. From the Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, it's a neutral site game. North Carolina coming in at 21 in the nation versus the Gamecocks of South Carolina. Trey, it's your Tar Heels. We're going to you first.
Yeah, and when we do these things, you try to be a little bit impartial. And when you're a Tar Heel fan, you're forced to be really impartial. This is the first of two games we will talk about tonight where it is absolute quarterback central. This is Drake May from North Carolina, a Heisman candidate, versus Spencer Rattler for the Gamecocks. You could make a case. Maybe he's a dark horse, but these are two teams that, quite frankly, last year finished going in opposite directions. South Carolina defeated Clemson. They defeated Tennessee down the stretch, lost the bowl game to Notre Dame, but it was 45-38. Good showing. North Carolina, I have to say North Carolina for the South Carolina fans that are listening. There's an argument of who's Carolina, but that's for another day. North Carolina started so good, wound up 9-5 on the season, but they lost their last four games, including a 28-27 loss to Oregon in the bowl game. So where does that leave us going into this year? As far as North Carolina is concerned, look, it's no secret. Everything's based around Drake May, and they're going to put up numbers. There's no doubt about that. Last year, he threw 38 touchdowns. He was over 4,200 yards. He's a superstar. He even was the team's leading rusher. That can't happen this year. They've got a stable of running backs that are all healthy they can rely on. They are absolutely loaded at wide receiver. They're loaded at the skill spots. The question, as always, with North Carolina is going to be this. Can the offensive line hold up? And can that defense that, quite frankly, was awful last year, can it be better? They gave up more yards per game than anybody else in the ACC. They just weren't good. So where's their strength? Quarterback, offensive skill positions. Defense, they're very good at linebacker. They've got bodies. They've got depth. But it's time for Mack Brown to turn that depth into wins. There's no secret what the Tar Heels are going to be. If the defense is a little bit better, and Drake May is Drake May, they're going to have a really good year. Flip it over to South Carolina. It's kind of the opposite. Spencer Rattler's going to do his thing. This team has a really good wide receiver who's back, and Wells. He was their leading receiver. He's back. Only one scholarship running back returning. They gave up over 200 yards rushing per game last year. There's no secret about this game. Which defense is going to step up? It's that simple. The Gamecocks have won in this series lately. They've won 3 out of the last 4 games against North Carolina. Everybody's going to expect a shootout. The total's around 64. Carolina's what? Depending on where you look, 2.5 points here. I think that's right on. I think this is a dead even ball game. I think South Carolina inherently SEC. That defense, you think they're going to step up more than Carolina's defense. But I do think Carolina's skill players win this one by a field goal. But watch whether Trez Walker gets cleared by the NCAA prior to the game. If he does, he's a game changer. If he does not, it's a big, big loss for the Tar Heels. But I'll take them 34-31.
Sounds good. I'm a little rusty. It's week one. I apologize. I didn't give out the numbers as I sent it to you, Trey. As Trey mentioned, Carolina comes into the game, small 2.5-point favorite, a total of 64.5. Ian, which Carolina do you like?
Yeah, so obviously Trey knows this North Carolina program inside and out. Experience they were playing there, his former coach there, Mac Brown, being there. And it's all spot on. Drake May is the man. He's staying there. He had a chance to leave. He's going to be a top 10 pick, most likely in NFL draft. What concerns me a little bit about North Carolina this season is they did finish not so great. They lost a ton of talent. They lost their skill players, and like you said, whether or not the receiver gets cleared or not, because that's huge for that team. That's where their talent lies. That's where their big play lies. And I do think the one under the radar loss that I really, really, really worry about is the offensive coordinator Phil Longo going to Wisconsin, and that's what concerns me right there, because he was the guy really pulling the strings behind a lot of that offensive firepower the last couple of years we've seen from North Carolina, and that's where I'm concerned is how is Drake May going to be with somebody new at the helm? And we've seen quarterbacks struggle off some offensive coordinator changes, and that we've seen kind of a trend here in the transfer portal era of quarterbacks following their old offensive coordinators back to whatever school they might have landed on. And we saw a couple of that happen. We saw Bo Nix really take off last year. We saw a couple transfers within the ACC this year, even with that. So I'm curious to see how Drake May is going to react without Phil Longo calling the shots for him, and now that he's at Wisconsin. On the other side, Shane Beamer's done such a tremendous job with that South Carolina team, devoid of talent and quarterbacks his first season, making a bowl game last year, really turning on at the end with Spencer Rattler, who is a very talented quarterback without a doubt, and he runs it by offense. Antoine Wells is a game changer. They returned 6 out of the 11 starters. I do expect points. We've seen a lot of teams, even in the SEC, shift over to try to put points up on the board with offense, and that's Beamer's game. I wouldn't expect it any different. Spencer Rattler is the boom or bust quarterback. I think this is a great live betting spot. Whoever gets the ball first probably going to score. Go bet the other side. The one thing I'm curious about is this is the type of game where you see up-tempo offenses, fast-moving offenses, athletic quarterbacks who can get on the run and get in the air. How's this clock change going to affect it?
Yeah.
How many less plays are we going to see? So about 4 to 5 less plays in week 0. These are smart coaches. They're going to play a little bit more on tempo, try to steal some of those plays a little bit. But that's really what I'm curious to see is how those how is these two up tempo teams going to react to the new clock changes. So week 1, week 2. I look for little coaching changes, things in continuity versus things in not continuity. Continuity in South Carolina, year 3 with Coach Beamer, year 2 with Spencer Rattler. A little bit at discontinuity with North Carolina with the new offense coordinator change. Some skill position players out. I'm going to lean the SEC naturally.
Moving to Sunday night, 7:30 Eastern, also on ABC. We're going to Camping World Stadium in Orlando. It's supposedly a neutral site game, but this is much closer to Florida State World than it is LSU. Rematch from last year, crazy game, went right down to a last missed extra point. Florida State is a 2.5-point underdog, total of 56.5. What are we thinking, Ian?
Yeah, so last year, this game really propelled both teams in similar directions. Florida State got the win. It shot them right back into relevance in the national scene. LSU got a close loss first game under Brian Kelly, and they really improved throughout the year, and they were in the conversation at the end of the year. And now we got a clash here this year with the rematch of 2 top 10 preseason teams, which should be a tremendous heavyweight battle fight. We got 2 of the best dual threat quarterbacks out there, Jordan Travis for Florida State, Jaden Daniels for LSU, guys who were in the top 3 in odds, top 5 in odds in the Heisman conversation. Florida State also has one of the top NFL running back prospects in Trey Benson. They have some serious skill weapons there. And Florida State is going to look to make a statement. And Mike Norvell has done a great, slow process job of turning that around. Brian Kelly did a tremendous job also in his first year in getting that team to improve. And they are absolutely loaded at LSU. They are loaded. They are ready and primed to take it out. I do think that this is one of those games. Now, a couple factors come into play. There's a hurricane coming through Central Florida right now this week. Weather might be an issue. Field conditions going to be a question mark. There's a game in Orlando on Thursday night with UCF playing right after the storm comes. Then a game taking place now Saturday night or Sunday night with these two teams. See how kind of the field condition is possibly a factor there. But I look at overall depth of talent. Transfer portals come into play for both teams here. I just think that LSU has a little bit more depth of talent on both sides of the ball. I think points could be scored on either side. At the end of the day, is who do I trust more to make a play at the end of the game? Now, I know that Florida State made the plays last year at the end of the game. I also know that was Brian Kelly's first game at LSU. And I wouldn't trust – I think that might be a different result at the end of the game. And I think with the full offseason, with the transfer portal in place, I think this is another dogfight between two top programs. I think Florida State could afford the loss. I hate to say a little bit less because I think LSU can really get away with a loss similar to they did last year. But I do think LSU comes out on top. I just think they're too deep for Florida State. Florida State maybe top 3 best players are more talented, but the best 22, I'm gonna lean LSU. I think it's gonna be a little bit lower scoring than we anticipate, maybe 27-24 here.
Ian's on the Tigers. Trey?
Yeah, it's Ian makes a lot of sense there. In this game, it's weird. Florida State is getting so much love. And I get it. I mean, they have got so many good players that were 10-3 last year. And listen, when you're in college football and you're a fan, or even if you're the experts talking on Saturday, the talking heads, when you can jump on Florida State and say, hey, the Seminoles are back. If you can jump on the Miami Hurricanes and say the Hurricanes are back, everybody does it. And I'm not sliding Florida State in any way. I just think it's a little much. It's just my gut. It's just a little – I think they're certainly trending in that direction. But when I look at this matchup, there's that game last year, don't think LSU's not going to remember that. I mean, this is a revenge game for them. Losing that, a block extra point at the end. And LSU has a dominant front seven on the defensive side of the ball. Now, they are going to be missing Mason Smith, NIL, illegal benefits, all that kind of stuff that I can't make sense of anymore. He'll be out. That hurts them. Their biggest question on the defensive side of the ball is the secondary. They got some transfers in there. And one of the skill guys for Florida State is a big 6'7" wide receiver, Johnny Wilson. That's a matchup problem for LSU. But, David, you know how I like to go to my stats, right?
Hit me.
So here I'm gonna go for the first. This is the first time this year. You ready?
Hit me.
LSU 10-1 when they rushed for over 140 yards. You ready? 0-3 the last times when they've rushed for under 140 yards in a game. Last year, Florida State allowed over 140 yards rushing 7 times. They were gashed by Florida and Oklahoma in their last 2 games on the ground. So for me, when I look at that, look, it's a new year. I know teams change. Philosophies don't. And Brian Kelly's going to look to make a statement, a physical statement. I think that's where LSU wins this game. I do think it's a really, really good, fun football game to watch when you have Jordan Travis and Daniels playing quarterback for these two teams. Dual threat quarter. It's going to be a show. It's going to be great. But I look at the difference being in the trenches. And when you look at those rushing stats and Florida State's inability to stop the run last year, have they fixed that? We'll find out. But I'm going to lean on that trend and take the Tigers in a small victory, 27-24.
Same score for both of us. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
Two on the
and we have not discussed this prior to taking.
No, we haven't. That's 2 on the Tigers for that one. Last game of week 1, Monday Night Football of the college variety, 8 p.m. Eastern, ESPN. This is from Wallace Wade Stadium on the Duke campus in Durham, North Carolina. Clemson is coming to town. Clemson is a 13-point favorite at Duke, total of 55.5. Ian, we're going to you first.
Yeah, this is a tough podcast for Trey. And at least we got to talk about his Tar Heels. I got to talk about Florida. We got to talk about Duke now. Like, what's going on? But these are our 3 primetime games without a doubt. This might be the only time we get to talk about the ACC all year. So we gotta do it when they get their primetime games in. But on this game, I'm a big time believer in Clemson this year, and I think the ACC is really down to 2 teams. It's down to Florida State and Clemson. I give Clemson a slight edge. I think the strength of schedule a little bit for Clemson is a little bit easier. You know, Florida State they have that LSU game. They still got that Florida game at the end of the year, which shouldn't really be that much for them this year. And Clemson will have that South Carolina game, but I think that this game will be a little bit strength of schedule overall will be a little bit easier for Clemson, but that doesn't matter in the ACC as much because they're going to play each other, and we'll see what happens at that point. But let me tell you why I'm getting behind Clemson this year. Clemson was really, really close last year with the quarterback DJU at the helm. They got a lot better when Cade Klubnik was there. If they had just kind of gone away from DJ and now DJU is at Oregon State, they probably would have been in the playoff conversation and not lost some of those late close games that they did. Kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily call Dabo Swinney a stubborn college football head coach, but he doesn't even believe in the transfer portal. So I'm going to go ahead and call him a stubborn college football head coach because I think he's the definition of it. And by kind of refusing to make the switches early on, I think did cost him last year. Now, what does he do in response to that? Now, he lost Brad Venables last year. That might have been a little punch in the gut, not understanding how to switch it. He went out, he got Garrett Riley from TCU. What did Garrett Riley do last year at TCU? Well, he led them to the national title game with Max Duggan and at quarterback. And I just think that switch and giving the offense over to a proven OC, a young up-and-comer OC, making a switch when so many schools tried to make a switch at OC and just couldn't get the guy. Clemson went out and got a guy. And that's going to put Cade Klubnik, who is a blue-chip recruit, in a tremendous spot for success. Talking Cade Klubnik, Will Shipley back. Those are 2 guys that are really, really, really talented and really move the ball. And Clemson still recruits at a high enough level that they should have that they're going to be the most talented team on the field most times that they play. Now, the ACC isn't that deep, so it's going to be their benefit. They're really good at the top. The middle is kind of questionable, bottom not so great. So they're going to have a lot of chances to prove their worth. And they're going to have a lot of primetime chances for Clemson to prove their worth to it in the big picture. So I'm a big Clemson believer this year, and I think Cade Klubnik is definitely – they had one bet to make in the Heisman Trophy, it'd be on Cade Klubnik. So I think Clemson, with the coaching change, the OC change, and maybe, Dabo's taking a step back a little bit, will be a good thing for them because he's got to kind of embrace what college football has become with NIL and with the transfer portal because that's just what it is. And this might be the last shot for him to prove it otherwise. Now, tough game on the opening game here. And again, continuity. Cade Klubnik coming off starting. I know it's a new OC. A lot of things are still in place. Will Shipley, Cade Klubnik going on the road to Duke. Duke had a great season last year. Riley Leonard is back at quarterback. I really like Coach Mike Elko, I believe his name, right?
Yep.
He's a tremendous young up-and-coming head coach. Riley Leonard really did a lot of good things. Duke's a team that you can count on for 6, 7 wins, and they're going to have some good competitive games. I just think they're outclassed here. I think they're outclassed on the field. I don't necessarily think they're outclassed on the sideline. I think they're outclassed on the field. Leonard can play. He's a great dual threat. He's a really smart player. I just don't think they have the chops to hang with Clemson. I know it's at home. I know it's week 1. I know it'll be a nice crowd. I like Clemson by 3 touchdowns here, and I think that they're going to uplift their season, starting with this game right here on the Monday night isolation game. Start that Heisman run for Cade Klubnik.
Ian's on another Tiger team. This one, Clemson. Trey?
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. And one note right out of the chute with what Ian closed with. This is a road game, but make no mistake, they're not walking into the Lions' Den at Wallace Wade Stadium. This is not a great home field advantage for the Duke Blue Devils. And look, I'm a North Carolina Tar Heel. I'm not taking a shot here at Duke. It's just a fact. Most games, there are more opposing fans there than there are Duke home fans. And Clemson fans travel. There's going to be a lot of orange in that stadium on Monday night. I think really Ian touched on it. Maybe the biggest offseason move was getting Garrett Riley from TCU to come to Clemson. That offense at Clemson had gotten stale. It was predictable. It just was not explosive, and that's not the Clemson we've known. There's also fuel to this fire. Second year in a row last year that Clemson didn't make the college football playoff. That's how they measure themselves. Yeah, they were ACC champs, but that's not how they measure football at Clemson anymore. And we can look at this team and talk about the quarterback, Klubnik, and all these things. But listen, this team has one of the premier defenses in the country. 8 starters returning, Jeremiah Trotter leading that team at linebacker. They are loaded on defense. This is your classic Clemson Tiger, get after it on defense type of team. That's everything they've got. They're loaded. I think Ian's right. We're going to talk about college football playoff in just a minute. I think they've got a legit shot because of their schedule. If you flip it and look at Duke, I am a Mike Elko fan. The coach for Duke, incredible year last year. 9-4. They beat Central Florida in the Military Bowl. Riley Leonard, we touched on the quarterback being back. Listen, they returned 17 starters. I mean, this is an experienced, good football team. People are going to tune in Monday night and go, "Oh, Clemson, Duke. Why is it? This is going to be a butchery." And I do think Clemson wins, but don't underestimate what Duke does the rest of the year, even if they get clubbed in this first game. This is a solid football team with a good foundation. That I'm with Ian. I think they win 7 games this year, possibly more. But when you look at this matchup with Ian, I think the problem comes in Clemson's defense versus Duke's offense. I think Duke's defense will play well. But again, a couple stats I'll give to you. Clemson's 7-3 against the spread their last 10 road games. And they're not walking into, Georgia here, or Bama, or someplace like that. And I didn't hear – what's the over-under on this one, Dave? What's the total?
55.5.
Here's another one. Last 30 games in September for the Clemson Tigers. So it's not a small sample size. 30 games in September. Clemson is 22-8 to the under in September. Now, we've got a new offensive coordinator. We'll see if they just explode. But I like the Tigers just like Ian. A little bit closer, 31-17, and staying under that number due to the trends.
Great stuff. All right, we are going to move on and give you a little season-long thoughts, little longer, big picture stuff here. Give me a few things, or one, Ian. What are you looking most forward to this season, or what bothers you most this season?
I'm looking forward to see how some of these changes and some of these new movements come into play. I also want to see how some of the teams respond in the last year in a specific conference. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the new teams and new conferences, but I'm really curious to see how is Oklahoma and Texas faring? How is UCLA and USC and the other teams that are leaving Oregon and Washington? How are they faring? And they're knowing that these are the last teams of some of their big games, their rivalry games. How are they going to react in those situations? How are they going to, be in some of these? How are the fans going to perceive them? These are college kids. There's a lot of movement already within it. I think the transfer portal has just become a whole different ball game. And this year, more than ever, again, same idea. We got a lot of not as similar faces in new places. So I just want to see how all this change comes back in this college football season, and how teams adapt to it, how coaches adapt to it, how really the betting market adapts to it, because I think there's going to be a little bit of there's a lot of gaining to do, because there's a lot of new faces. We saw last week, week 0, a former 4-star Clemson quarterback take the helm for UMass, and then UMass gets a win, one of their few victories over a bowl team from last year. So I just think things like that, a lot of players moving down, players moving up, we'll just see a lot of craziness, and it's going to be fun to see some new faces lock into some different places. One of the biggest changes I'm looking forward, you got a workhorse running back from Ball State, Indiana, former Indiana Player of the Year, going out to LA to take over the backfield at UCLA. Now, if that's not a transfer portal college football marriage made in heaven, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Good stuff. That's a great answer. Trey.
Yeah, the clock running on first downs, how that
Interesting.
affects totals in these games, and all of that from a betting angle. It's going to be really interesting to watch, and it's an adjustment, coaching wise, player wise, quarterbacks looking. It's completely different for these guys. So that's a big story in how these games play out. Do we see a little bit less scoring? I don't know about that, but we'll have to see it play out. The other thing, like Ian said, it's just where these guys end up and some unknowns at quarterback. Georgia's the odds-on favorite to win this again. Who knows who their starting quarterback is? We do, but does the average fan know who a Carson Beck is? Somebody like that.
Ohio State, same deal.
Yeah, same thing. And then you look at teams like Michigan, where they return a J.J. McCarthy, and teams that have that, Caleb Williams at USC. The Texas quarterback situation. Ewers versus Arch Manning. I mean, there's a lot of fascinating change of venue, quarterback competition, unproven guys in spots where we are just assuming that those guys are going to step in and the team's going to roll on like they have been the last 2 years, especially in Georgia's case. And chances are they will. But it's still unproven. We have to see that play out. And I just think these teams on the outside looking in, David, the ones we think we know are going to be in the college football playoff picture. I know we're getting ready to get to that. But those ones on the perimeter, the Southern Cals of the world, you can even talk about the LSUs, even Bama being ranked fifth,
Questions.
Georgia, LSU, there's questions there. Clemson getting back in it. I just think that 3, 4, 5 area is going to be really, really competitive this year. So what I'm hoping for is once we get to that point where the college football playoff is getting ready to get settled, that it's just not easy choices. I want to see some teams get beat. That's what I want to see.
I think we're going to see it this year.
And it's the last year that we have to deal with, so many changes going to happen next year. It's going to be a whole different landscape.
Yeah.
Before we get to the playoffs, Ian, I'm going to put you on the spot. Your Gators are going into – Trey told us about not such a hostile environment in Duke, but I'll give you the absolute opposite. Rice Eccles at night in Salt Lake City, Utah. Your Gators, Thursday night, going to Utah. They're getting about 6.5. Carson Rising, the Utah quarterback, a real stud, is questionable. Looks like he's not going to play. Ian, I know you love your Gator team. I know you know so much about this team. Got a little insight on this game?
I wish I had better insight. I don't think Cam Rising's going to play.
Yeah.
Looks like Utah's been on a third-string quarterback. Utah was a much more physical team, a much deeper team. And I think that's really where the Gators, there's a lot of pessimism about the Gators, and I totally understand it. In a revenge spot going out to altitude at Utah, it's not something that you could. There's such a home field advantage on both sides, the altitude and the humidity in the swamp that you got to feel. And now with the hurricane coming through over Gainesville, it's kind of the travel's getting a little bit messed up with their plans. So I don't know how acclimated they're going to be. Of course, these are all excuses. At the end of the day, this seems like a total stopgap year for Coach Napier. I'm hoping they can get to 6 wins, be competitive. I think that a positive for Florida is their 2 best players are their 2 running backs. They can find a way to get the running backs the ball. They have some top-end talent on defense, just not deep. I mean, this is the problem with when Dan Mullen was the coach. He just wasn't recruiting well, and a lot of guys left. Now, when you fast forward to next year, Florida's got a top 3 recruiting class already with the top-rated quarterback. So that is something to get excited about. And now you're talking about guys 25 deep in a recruiting class, kind of similar like we saw in the Swamp King days, referring to that, again, special from my days at Florida. But it's going to be a slow process. My sister texted me the other day. She's like, "You excited for Florida?" I was like, "Of course I'm excited for Florida. I'm going to get excited for Florida always." But I'm always going to get excited for Florida. I hope that people have patience and realize that it's going to take time right now. You need to turn over the roster. They got transfers in. I hope on Thursday night when they go to Utah, they can control the line of scrimmage a little bit, let their players play, hopefully there's a little bit of new game nerves, and hopefully Graham Mertz, a change in venue. He was a highly rated quarterback, can get a little bit of settled down, run the offense, kind of control the game, slow it down, use the clock to their advantage, and maybe keep it close within a score that it comes down to the end of the game. Maybe a backup quarterback isn't quite there, and Florida could maybe sneak one out. Do I think so? Probably not. Do I hope so? Of course, I'll be watching.
Great stuff. All right, Trey. All right, Ian, here we go. This is our last year where the playoffs will be 4 teams. Next year, we're going to expand them. We're going to have 3 rounds. Some teams are going to be at home. Some are going to be on the road. Some are going to have byes. But this is the last year we're stuck with the final 4. Trey, can I have your final 4, please? Your champion, please. And give me one team outside there that you think has a real shot that you think we might be talking about in December.
Final 4, chalk, Georgia. I just think it's reload in Athens until somebody beats them and proves it different. They're just on a different playing field right now than everybody else. Georgia, number 1. I'll go another chalk. I like Michigan, number 2. I like them over Ohio State because of the quarterback situation. J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, Kyle McCord, who I know has all the tools at Ohio State, but again, a new starter. I'm going to give Michigan the edge. I mean, they return their running backs, just loaded at Michigan with a legitimate shot at a national championship. The 3rd and 4th teams I'm going with Alabama out of the SEC, just because nobody, it's Georgia and Georgia and Georgia, and Nick Saban has a way of when that's happening, stepping back in and reminding everybody that he's great and Bama's still there. And the 4th team, I'm going with what Ian said earlier because of the path, and that's Clemson. I think it's Georgia, Michigan, Bama, and Clemson, Ohio State right there, and LSU gets left out. Texas, USC's in the mix. But I'm going with that, and the only reason I'm going Clemson, like Ian said, because they've just got a path where I don't think they lose. I just don't see the ACC producing any kind of upset there. Surprise team. Ian touched on it briefly. If I'm looking for somebody in a conference to shock everybody, I'm going with the Wisconsin Badgers. New coach Luke Fickell, quarterback transfer from SMU, Tanner Mordecai, who throws the ball over the field. You're used to seeing Wisconsin do nothing but run. Phil Longo's there. He's introducing the air raid into that Wisconsin offense. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Phil Longo and watching his offenses go. He was at Ole Miss. He was at Carolina. He's been successful everywhere he's been. He's going to change that offense in a way that people aren't used to at Wisconsin. Do I think they're going to win it all? No. But if you find a team, they've got all their receivers and all their running backs coming back, that is going to shock people just with the way they play. They've got a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, just a whole new environment in Wisconsin. I think they can win that side of the Big Ten. And, long shot to win it in the championship game. I'll take the Badgers.
I like it. I like the reasons. Ian.
Yeah, so I'm going to go a little bit off the rails here with my final 4 picks. I'm going to look for a
shocking.
At the SEC, I'm going to say LSU is going to be the team that makes it there. I think they win the West and they're going to overtake Georgia. I don't think Georgia's going to have the leash that they had before. If they're undefeated and lose it with some other scenarios happening here that I'm going to talk about, I think they're going to have to win. There might just be a little bit of fatigue on Georgia. Now, they're still a champ, so it's still a back-to-back champ, so you still got to beat them, but I think they trip up a little bit here. Texas. The path for Texas in the Big 12 is about as easy, and I say this lightly, as easy as it could be for them because they're going to the SEC next year, and the way that the Big 12 championship, it's the top 2 teams at the end of the year. There's no divisions. So I think they could escape with a loss or 2. I think they do get that win over Alabama. That's going to be the signature win. And they're just so much more talented than everybody else in that conference. So I don't see more than 1 loss coming out. If they get that win over Alabama, they could survive a loss and a win in the conference title game. Now I'm going to go 2 teams out of the Big Ten because, number 1, Michigan, their schedule is so weak on the front end that they should be undefeated heading the big game. maybe with this other team I'm going to mention. I think they win that game, and then they'll have likely Wisconsin in a tough Big Ten championship game. The other team I'm going to go with there, Penn State. Another team with not a great schedule, but Penn State is talented up the wazoo. They got skill players for days. They got a great defense. They got NFL talent levels there. The Big Ten's going to be, I think, again, they're going to get 2 teams in this year. Now, this will be a round robin between Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. I think they all kind of beat up on each other. But Penn State's likely the team that be left out with like the 15th tiebreaker because they're playing Northwestern will keep them out of the Big Ten title game. It might help them out because I think it allows them to sneak in if they got a chance in there. So that's where I'm looking. Did I say? Yeah, so those are my 4 teams: Michigan, Penn State, Texas, and LSU. I do think Brian Kelly and LSU, as much as pains me to say, gets the win there because I got to think the SEC team is going to end up winning. But I don't really know after that. My dark horse team, I know I was all about Kansas last year because it was a bet against team. And I think you could have some bet against teams that are going to really do a lot better in the mid-major levels. So you're talking about Hawaii, who we already saw much improved. Colorado State, I think, is being much improved. I think there's going to be a lot of bet on spots for some of these teams that have been bottom dwellers. USF, another team that I like to bet on. But the team that I like to make a push, I really like the Pac-12 is really deep this year. The problem is I think they're going to beat up on each other a little bit much. And I think the team that probably we don't know much about, but has a lot of talent, they're already getting a lot of buzz in the betting community. Oregon State. Oregon State hosts most of their tough games. They're also the team that didn't get invited to the dance anywhere else. So they got Oregon leaving them, Washington leaving them. Washington and Oregon State, I think, are the 2 best teams in that conference. And Oregon State gets to host these games. I think DJU going back to the West Coast in a new environment will be very, very good for him. And, I just like Oregon State this year to surprise, shoot up, make a push, just like Washington did last year. So there we're at.
I like that call. I am really well coached Oregon State Beaver team. Trey?
Just going to say, I didn't say out of that Final Four who I thought was going to win it all. I'm going with Michigan.
All right. Mine are going to sound very familiar here. I'm going
David.
with Georgia.
Oh, go ahead.
Georgia's path. You want to talk about paths? I agree with Clemson. Georgia's path is so easy that the toughest game might be Tennessee, and I think they'll be a 2-touchdown favorite. Their side of the SEC division is really down this year. They don't need they don't have LSU or Alabama. I look for Georgia to fly through the SEC all the way to the SEC championship. I'm going with 2 from the Big Ten. I do like Penn State. I like the call, but it's too hard for me to get away from Michigan and Ohio State. I like Penn State's team this year a lot. And the 4th, I'm going, Ian mentioned it, Texas. That path is, I don't think Oklahoma puts up a lot of resistance. I think the last time in the Big 12, they want to give a statement going away. And I'll take Michigan finally breaking through for Harbaugh, win a national championship again.
All right, guys. That's awesome. We're up against it, Trey. Give us 30 seconds on the edge of it all before we head out.
Season 2, episode 1 came out yesterday with 80s legendary actor Corey Feldman. There will be a new episode out every other Monday. Look forward to you can get it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, wherever you get your podcast. Just search bar, The Edge of It All with Trey Edge. You'll find it. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, David.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Happy college football season, everyone.
Absolutely. Enjoy it, guys.